pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'd like to welcome all our guests this evening. Thank you for being here. ¿Hay necesidad para traducción al español? If not, thank you, Emma, for being here. Thank you. Moving on to item A3, I'll entertain a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
I move to approve the agenda as written.
Motion been made by Director Simmons to approve agenda.
Second.
Seconded by Director Mike Garza. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 3-0. Moving on to item B1. I believe we do have public comment. So Jen, could you please come forward? And just as a quick reminder, please keep your comments to 3 minutes maximum. Be concise with your comments, and the board may choose to extend whatever time just to make sure we understand what you're requesting. So go ahead.
Great, thank you. I just would like to publicly invite each of the board members. We are having an open house at the Old Hotel Art Gallery. For our Artist of the Month is Gretchen Durpo, the middle school, if you would like to take one and pass, or just take it and pass, I guess. The middle school art teacher. We are having an open house tomorrow night from 6 to 8. We do have punch and cookies. So you're welcome. You're all invited to come. Not only would it be benefiting a small nonprofit, but also supporting one of your own employees. And then also just another note, the Old Hotel Art Gallery auction is on October 28th. Our theme this year is the Kentucky Derby. And so we're looking for big hats. Think royal wedding hats. And as always, we have a buffet, a dinner buffet, and wine and whiskey tasting. And we're looking into beer for those that have to have beer as well. Because many people tell me, oh, I love to have the wine tasting, but my husband would prefer beer. So we have to accommodate as many as possible. Questions? Ms. Durpo's art is huge. She has some really large pieces, and it fills a lot of our space. We had to clear most of the stairs to even accommodate all of it. So there's a lot of great stuff. So, okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Thanks for the invitation. Moving on to item B2. Our student reps are not present this evening, so we will move on to item B3. Board member reports. And so, is there a legislative report,
There's
Director
no legislative
Simmons?
report that I'm aware of.
Okay. Moving on to our next item, the Linkage Committee. I know that last week the Linkage Committee was able to meet, and I don't know if one or a couple of board members were able to be there. So is there any comment or question for the board about that committee meeting?
I think Director Ashton and I were just there to help to give the intent of the policy, purpose of the committee, and to answer any questions in regards to that, and then we left. So, no, I don't have anything more to add.
Okay, so it's the process is going to be ongoing, beginning.
Yeah, I mean the policy said it would be to the end of October. It might have said our next board meeting, and I think the feedback I got was that was going to be enough time, because we talked about possibly extending it if that wasn't enough time, because we had a delay on our end, but I haven't heard anything. We still have that option though if the committee needs more time.
Great. Okay, the next item is a conversation was struck between a couple of board members regarding maybe the possibility of providing a meeting or a dinner or some sort of workshop with our farming community and members of the community regarding our bond presentation. And so what I'd like to do is just get a board discussion going regarding, should it be something that the board should entertain? Or is it something that maybe our bond committee chairperson should take on as part of their role? And so I'd welcome any discussion on that.
My only comment is I didn't see it on their list, the people that they were planning on seeing. So I think somebody needs to meet with them. If it's not them, then the board needs to, is my view. But I don't think just for the bond. I think we could meet with them for other reasons. Just maybe the linkage committee will bring them back as a person, as one of their recommendations too. I don't know. But I didn't see it in that list that I saw today.
So that list said, I guess we'll get to it, but that said businesses, but it was like businesses plus some civic groups, plus some general groups, that not necessarily civic groups. So I guess it was kind of an all-inclusive list. Would that be safe to say? Okay.
I know that our bond committee chair is here, and I don't know, do you expect to have that group on your list? We know? Okay. And so, any other discussion pertaining, making sure that we meet with that group of folks, knowing that there's a concern? No? Okay. Awesome. Moving on to land lease discussion. I know that we've had some discussions regarding the land lease, and I know our finance director has mentioned to us and given us some options regarding the current the lease that we just, I guess, finished with a farmer that is wanting to continue that lease, or another option, which was maybe another farmer being interested, but it sounds like it's going to cost too much money for them to be able to farm that land with no water. So I don't know.
Yeah, I have lots of questions. Unless the rest of the board has questions first. I don't want to put our finance director on the spot. So if you don't know the answer to these questions, you can get back to me with them. It's not a big deal. My first question is and I'm going to, my understanding is that at some point we have to put in our own irrigation system on that property when we build.
That is correct.
Okay. So if it makes that property, and again, I guess my view of renting that ground is that whatever we get for that ground is a savings to the district and a savings to the taxpayer. So to me, it's not that we're going out to try to make a profit. To me, it's mitigating either costs that we can use and saving the taxpayer money. And I feel like as a board member, it's my job to do whatever I can to save the taxpayers money. And so I guess my question is if we need to put in an irrigation system anyway, my understanding is if we have an irrigation system that it increases the value that people will pay to rent that ground for things like drip irrigation onions that don't need a circle, and mainly drip irrigation onions. Is I know that they bring in their own drip systems. All they need is water. And so, from my view, if we can put in the irrigation system that we know we have to put in now, and get $300 or $400 more an acre rent for the next 2 years, that's just a savings to the district and a savings to the taxpayer. So I don't know I don't know how you address that other than that. I think we've got to make it easier for people to rent the ground.
Certainly. An agricultural irrigation system is quite different than residential or commercial irrigation system. So any irrigation system that we would put in once the school is in place would be to, for example, irrigate the lawns like a sprinkler irrigation system. For agriculture, we would need to reactivate the current hookup, and as it stands now, all of the subterranean piping, so the piping that goes from that hookup, which is the canal source of water, excuse me, to the current center pivot, belongs to the farmer who.
It's correct, but when you do a drip, when you do a drip irrigation system, you don't need a center pivot.
No, I understand.
You don't
that.
need any pipe to go to a circle because you won't use a circle.
I understand that.
And my understanding is the irrigation system that we put in has to be bureau water by city requirements now. We can't use city water to irrigate when we build. So we have to turn that Bureau water on at some point. And, and I guess I would challenge a little bit that when you're using drip irrigation, it's just like it's the same system as you would use as you're gonna use for sprinklers eventually. It's no bigger, no different.
Okay. I'm happy to look into that. I cannot say offhand the type of system, but again, I'm happy to look into it.
I would ask Tony, can you do back-to-back drip irrigation onion crops?
You'd have
trying
to
to go
ask.
back to my Simplot days, and
You'd have to
I
ask
don't
a
think I ever
farmer,
saw it.
but I believe you can, especially when that's not gonna be farmed forever. If you were gonna have it as agricultural ground for the next 100 years, you probably don't wanna do that.
Mhm.
But they do back-to-back potatoes and onions in the Tri-Cities on Block 1 ground that's gonna go into houses.
Oh,
They get the most rent they can get, and then it goes into houses.
So let me ask this question, Brian, and maybe you could help me with this. How long will it take, first of all, you probably don't know this yet, but how long would it take you to find out whether that would work or not? And do we have a proposal on the table from the current farmer that has been leasing the land? And if that's so, then we as a board, I think, need to make a decision.
Yes, so I'll address the second question first. We do not have a current proposal. I spoke with Mr. Ochoa last week. He runs a company, and he is currently in harvest, which is extensive. He is going to stop in this week and sit down with members of the district, discuss it, and submit a proposal. So at this time, I do not have it. However, by the end of this week, I do plan to have it. I do not know how long it would take to set up everything. Getting back to the first half, I'm happy to look into that, but I do not know that right now.
And just as one board member, when you do meet with the farmer, if you could ask, how long is he willing to wait before we find out if there's other options or not? Because
Sure.
that could be something the board needs to take into consideration, whether we need to act more quickly than not. And so,
Just so you know, that particular farmer rents his own ground for drip onions to Scone and Connors, and so he may be able to give you information too. I'm sure that he may have not have thought of using that ground for that, but he does a partnership with them.
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Any other questions from the board on that topic? Okay. Moving on.
Wait.
Go ahead.
I do have one. And Tony, you had brought this up, it was a while back that you had brought this up in this entire discussion I was having with you of an idea of doing something with students with that land. And you hadn't mentioned that.
I had mentioned it in a board meeting. I mentioned it to Dr. Hurst. I don't know where that went, but I did. I forgot about that. That was another option that I had talked about, is that if there isn't any other options besides renting that ground for a minimal cost, from my view as a board member, if there's a way to use that ground for students, to let students farm it, to me that's a better option than renting the ground so inexpensive to a farmer like we did this year. From my view, I know there's grants and options that you can do that through FFA, but I didn't spend a lot of time researching it. I just gave the information to Chris.
Yeah, we mentioned it, so I think we'll follow up on that.
So we'll keep that same discussion on for our next board meeting and go from there. Next is, if the board recalls, several months ago, we had a workshop dealing with our bond that we are currently pursuing. At some point, there was a document that was given to the district by Dax from ESD, I believe, right? And he put side by side the bond with the sports complex and without the sports complex. And maybe the board can help me try and figure this out, but I don't remember the board ever coming to a decision on what route we're taking as far
We
as the sports
didn't,
complex.
but since we got that initial number from Dax, we had went back and looked at other options of doing a capital levy for a sports complex, and found out that the $5 million that we allocated, from my view, it's not going to be sufficient. It's way too, from my memory, and maybe you guys remember, My memory when we went out and searched the bids was the least expensive place at that time to do an athletic complex was on the Wahitas ground. And my memory is it was 14 million just for a minimal. And I haven't searched the board packets to find it, but I actually think it was in a workshop. I don't think it's actually in our board docs anywhere.
I'm actually looking at a memo from Architects West from December of last year, and they came back with kind of two options. I feel like we even got a couple bids after that, but one estimate was 13.8 million to develop a full athletic complex including 3 softball fields, 3 baseball fields, 1 soccer field, 8 tennis courts, 1 high school football stadium, track facility, and associated paid parking for 250 cars. Now this would be, this may have been before we got that $5 million estimate from the city for infrastructure. So it might be 13.8 even still, with the infrastructure costs being borne by the school, and then what they called a starter complex at 8.8 million. So I do think the 5 million would not be enough. And then also, as I'm looking at the, if you remember, the Capital Levy Committee came back and they did what I thought was a really good job explaining what they had come up with in their recommendations. And bringing it up right now. Essentially, they said, some on the committee feel that a higher capital levy request should be considered. 5 million collected over 2 years or 7.5 million over 3 years may not be sufficient. They then asked that they be included in some of these conversations going forward when design and these kind of discussions were happening. So I think if we're going to consider any type of an increase in the bond for sports complex, that the people who did the work on this absolutely should be part of it. That's my personal feeling, and then kind of get their feelings on what they think should happen.
So, a couple things. The numbers that Dax gave us are completely incorrect. Is that what I'm hearing?
How long ago was that?
I think it was a year at least before this.
Okay. So then in moving forward, do we want, just so that the presentations that we are going to be making to the community and to the groups and folks that in this community, that we're clear on that presentation, are we going ahead with the bond then without a sports complex and then come back as a board to consider a capital levy?
But doesn't part of the whole building over there, don't we have to put the infrastructure in place for that complex even though we don't build it yet? I mean, wouldn't that be part of the cost to do it? I mean, putting up both wings and the core space and everything else, the auditorium or whatever would go there. Wouldn't infrastructure for the sports complex be done at the same time?
That was not my understanding.
I think it could be.
To me, it's a construction question. I don't know, or is there gonna be like a separate trench for whatever water, electric or whatever that would be used specifically for the complex, the sports complex? Or would that be something that gets taken care of, put out to a certain point in the future when that, and if it gets approved, they tap into that and that's already there?
I may have missed it, President Garza, but I don't remember the board giving any clear direction at all
Right, and
regarding
the
the
reason
bond.
that it's
As
on
far-
discussion
As far
today-
as I know we've discussed 3 different bonds, 2 different bonds, 1 bond. I don't think the board's given direction to anyone as to what we're doing, but maybe I missed
No, I was
it.
going to mention that too. I was going to ask, I don't think, we did the surveys, but I don't think the board ever said this is where we're going to go with it, 2 separate bonds or all 1 bond, including a sports complex, separating it out. We had a few options there. I don't know if we've ever given direction on that.
My personal feeling is that we should have a workshop soon to really get together and figure out what we're gonna do. And invite the bond committee to come and maybe this other committee to come too.
Capital levy committee, the people who are on that. I think that would be a good idea.
I agree.
And I do feel it needs to be right away.
Well, I really feel like this is important, so let's set a date now for that workshop. If if you could look at your calendars and see, is there any time this week that any of you are available, or all of you?
I'm available Wednesday and Thursday until 7:30.
I'm available Tuesday and Friday.
I'm available Friday too, but
I'm out of
preferably not during the
out of
football
town
game.
Friday.
Yeah, Friday with homecoming might be a difficult time to meet, to get people to show up.
And I could do it Saturday too.
How about Saturday for everyone? No?
That wouldn't work for me.
I don't think I'll be in town.
Monday the 16th.
Yep, I can do that.
Monday would work? What
So-
time?
It's open as of now, so first come, first
Okay,
served.
Monday, October 16th. 6 PM, is that good? Will that work for everyone? 6:30?
I mean, I can be here
Doesn't matter to me.
possibly by 6, but 6:15, I'll definitely be able to be here by.
Okay, so let's say 6 o'clock. And Dr. Hurst, if you could invite our bond committee members and capital levy committee members, that would be wonderful.
And I think all the information we've gotten, all those surveys, that survey information, all that needs to be there for us to.
Whatever we can find as far as Dax, what Ron was referring to from Dax's notes and
Okay.
and the other sports complex information that committee did. And
Well, I think you're right. I think there was a workshop that we got 2 bids. One was like 20 million, one was like 11 million. That's this memory I have. But they're not in, I don't think they're in board docs.
Dax did it or if Gina did it.
I think that was Gina's.
Okay.
And, so that would be important. I think the one that we got from Architects West was in December. That was an estimate they threw out, but the bids were more like or January, maybe February. Yeah, is that what you remember, Tony?
Yeah.
It wasn't a bid, it was an estimate, but it was an estimate from a specific company that time.
Do you guys want Dax to be present at this workshop?
I don't know why it would hurt.
Yeah, if we can invite him as well, then that,
Is he the one to invite or Architects West or?
That's what I was thinking too.
maybe both.
Ed Champagne.
Maybe Ed and Dax. It wouldn't hurt.
I heard him.
Okay, anything else on this item? Okay, moving on to item C1, required approvals. So I'll entertain a motion to approve all of the required approvals on item C1.
I motion to approve the required approvals on item C1.
Motion's been made by Director Mike Garza to approve all the approvals on item C1 through C1-5. Mayor, second?
Second.
Second by Director Ashton. Any discussion?
Just kind of a quick question about the, sorry, nothing just popped up in front of me, I can't see it now, but, the calendar. These changes on the calendar, can you just summarize those for me really quick? Can somebody do that?
So what Colette, the OEA president, brought to our attention that she was under the impression that those were incorrect school dates. I think it was April 12th and 13th, and that they should have been reversed. So late start on Friday, the 13th, and then no school conferences on Thursday, the 12th.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 4-0. Moving on to item C2, Dr. Hurst.
Good evening. There's a few things that we would like to share with you under superintendent comments. First, we'd like to take you to just an aggressive campaign that we have in getting the word out and educating everyone about the bond, and it's just simply education from the school district. I wanted to first take you to our website So you can see what we have posted there. Under About OSD, under Bonds, you'll find this information. And you can see that we really have been sharing with everyone in the community two new schools on the Lee Street property, elementary school, middle school. We've really been highlighting the common space and really clarifying about the schedule and how do you schedule so those students don't interact. The example I've been sharing is at Warden. They have 3 schools. They have a common cafeteria. Those students are scheduled to use that cafeteria at certain times throughout the day. What I've been sharing with them also, the individuals I've been talking to, is imagine the lower grades, elementary school, eating lunch for 30 minutes, 11:30, 15-minute break, clean up, 11:45, middle school students come in, 11:45 to 12:15. Those students never interact with one another. So that's an example I've been sharing with everyone that I've been meeting with. That's been one of the issues or questions that have been coming up about how do you utilize the common space, making sure that the students do not interact with one another. And then also, one of the key components is the 2 new schools on the property, and then also a like-new high school, increasing the capacity to 1,500 students. So that's really been our message. And we have, if you go down, you can also see on the website, we have a register to vote, so you can vote online and click on that, enter your first name, and then it'll take you to another website where you can actually register. And then we also have placed on the website, assess your value or the value of your property. And again, as soon as we get updated information, these items or figures will be corrected based on our conversation that we're going to have with the committees. So we wanted to share that piece with the board about the website. Then another conversation we've been having is about the PDC guidelines, and just briefly we'll share that there's very specific guidelines of what employees can and cannot do, especially during school time. You cannot advocate, you cannot campaign, you can't wear a button either. We had Dr. Boda go to a conference, and he came back and shared with us that individuals, not the district, are being assessed a fine if they are out of compliance. An example he shared with us is a superintendent who actually liked a Facebook page that dealt with campaigning, and that individual superintendent is being assessed a fine. So it's not the district, it's the individual, correct?
Yeah, you could look at just in our region, Pasco had some major issues.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so you can find it in the Tri-City Herald. It was something similar to that. The superintendent got
Okay.
fined.
Well, I'm being
Pasco.
very, very careful. I'm watching my words. And so I wanted to share that piece with the board. And I wanted to also share with everyone that we met together as a team, as we do every week, and we brainstormed a list of businesses. And we know that it's not exhaustive, and we're still looking for individuals. And even this evening, I've heard some people that still need to go on this list that we have overlooked. We're very passionate about educating and just getting the word out to inform everyone within the community. So right now you can see that we have probably about 75 different organizations, and Talia can just kind of scroll through so everybody can see that. But what we've done as a leadership team is really paired up, and we have decided this is going to be the planned media, whether it's going to be a flyer, a presentation, pamphlet, or something. And then we started calendaring all of these. And again, this is certainly available to the board of directors. If anyone wants to join us, certainly Talia will reach out to you and we can schedule you in if you want to participate in any of these. But we think that this is an important strategy for the month of October, and what we've been sharing with everyone for the month of November. There will be town hall meetings, large meetings. We're trying to get in front of large audiences to, again, educate. And then our December strategy will be door to door. So we'll be breaking up Othello, and all of our directors, including myself, will be knocking on every door and talking to individuals about the bond. Again, it's education. Something else we wanted to share with the board in this area. In our school board visits, we've visited a couple of schools, and there have been some questions that have come up, and what we've been doing is compiling these questions. These will also go on the website, and we're very interested in just hearing any questions and educating. And we've had several meetings to date, and what we've been doing is educating and clarifying. So any misinformation that's out there, we're clarifying, and we've been very honest and transparent that we're interested in hearing your questions so we can get the correct information out to you. And again, this will be posted on the website. And you can see the questions right now go all the way up to question number 17. And we have additional questions that we'll be adding to this. So that's what we wanted to share with you about what's happening with our bond process. We do have what we believe is an aggressive process where we're trying to just educate and outreach to everyone that we can. So if anyone has any other organizations that we can go to and just educate, please feel free to let us know. We'd be happy to sit down with them face to face and just share the information with them. Next, I wanted to share with our board of directors state assessment data. Do have Justin Johnson here also if there's any real technical questions from the board of directors. But wanted to share a few things, and I'm going to share this in terms of gaps that we have compared from last year to this year, and then over a series of years also. So I'll just start just looking at the numbers. You see the percentages, but for me, I like hearing the numbers. So for our Hispanic population, we have right around 3,904 students, white 456 students, Asian 9 students, African American 4 students, and those with 2 or more races 17 students. When we look at our low income, you see the percentage there, but looking at the numbers, 3,584 low-income students. SPED students, 570, and English learners or limited English, 1,829.
So, Chris, these
Yes.
are self-reported numbers, is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I'm always surprised at the 2 or more races number, because I know that number's not right, but it's just because of how people report. I know there's a lot of mixed Hispanic and Anglo families in this community.
Absolutely.
So I have a hard time believing it's 0.4%.
Yeah.
But
I think
Yeah.
they're all mine.
you report it correctly.
So we wanted to look also at the next slide, the comparison. And what I'll be doing is sharing with you the gap. So just so you look at the upper portion of the graph is 2016, then the lower portion is 2017. So when you look at Othello in English language arts, there was actually just a very small increase, a 0.2, compared to the state in the same area, a -1. In math, Othello decreased 1.7, whereas the state had an increase of a 0.2. And low income increase in ELA, 1.3, whereas the state had an increase of a 3.2. Math for low income had a dip of 4.1, whereas the state had a dip of 1.9. The English learners, a dip of 1.2 in ELA, whereas the state had a dip of 1.3. And then in math for English learners, it was an increase for Othello of 3.8, and for the state, it was a dip of -2. So that's overall, that's all students compared to the state. So just looking at that picture, you can see that there's some work to do. There are some gaps, and there's significant gaps that we have to attend to. And I'll go much faster through some of the other data, but just to wrap up some of the gaps, when you look at English language arts, on the next slide, the fourth one, you can see there's a graph, so that represents all 3 through 5 graders ELA. And you can see to the right, we actually disaggregated the data to student groups. So when you look to the left at the graph, you can see gaps, 3 through 5. In 2015, a 22 percentage point difference or decrease between the state and ourselves. 2016, a 26-point deficit. 2017, a 24-point deficit. When you look at EL, or English learners, a 7.1% deficit. Low income, an 11.4 percentage point deficit. SPED, a 12.1 percentage point deficit. Hispanic, 8.4 percentage point deficit. The only increase is our white student group, which is 1.9 percentage point increase. So across the board, you can see that there's significant gaps in 3 through 5. But one of the things I want to just point out to the Board of Directors, this gives us current reality. So where do we go from here is the story. 6 through 8, it is much of the same, and what I will share, instead of reading all the gaps individually, that there were significant gaps from 2015, 2016, and 2017 when you look at the graphs for grades 6 through 8. And even when you look at the student groups, you can see for English learner, low income, SPED, Hispanic, significant gaps, especially with low income, SPED, Hispanic groups. And you can see the white student group had a increase from between the state and OSD of 1.2 percentage points. When you go to the 11th grade, you can see in 2015 that OSD actually had a plus 18 gap between us and the state, so we were higher than the state. And we had, in 2016, you can see a big deficit. And I will ask Justin to come up to explain that deficit. He explained it to me. Yes, sir.
So just real quick, the deficit occurred there because the state reports it only as 11th graders that take the test. And so our kids are able to take it as sophomores as well. So the state doesn't, those kids are already, they've already passed the test, so they don't have to take it as juniors. So this is actually only, I think, 106 kids roughly that took the test as juniors, and only 6% passed at that point. But it doesn't, like I said, it counts all the sophomores from the year previous in that same cohort that actually passed. So it's kind of a funny way to look at it, but that's the way the state reports it out. And also there's other ways for the students to meet the graduation requirement other than taking the Smarter Balanced, and so they get counted against us though if they hadn't taken it according to this number. So
don't you think though that that's the true for the whole state though, that they have plenty who are passing it as sophomores or taking the?
I haven't looked close
collective
enough to see how many in other districts that are doing the same thing, but I guess yeah, you could say that the same thing would be happening in other districts. I'm not 100% sure. So
I remember that explanation in that year when it happened. I recall that.
Thanks, Justin.
Yep.
When you look at mathematics for 3 through 5, you can see the gaps stayed about the same, even though the percentages are a little bit different or lower than English language arts. The gap of 215, 216, and 217 between OSD and the state was around 11 percentage points in the deficit for OSD. When you look at English learners, there was a increase So we did better than the state by 1.7 percentage points. Low income did better than the state by plus 0.8. SPED did worse than the state by 5.5, so we took a dip. Hispanic population student group did better than the state, 3.9. And then the white student group did better than the state, 14.9. When I looked at this, the question came up to my mind, well, if we overall kind of did better than the state, why does the graph not really support that? When I talked with Justin, he really broke it down to me that it's really kind of a weighted average piece. So when you look at the student groups, they may have a certain population, a small student group, whereas we have a bigger student group, so that weights it, makes a difference. So that's why we're still overall not doing better than the state. When you look at the next slide, I overlooked this one for the English language arts, but you can see the red line in the graph represents the district, so the average, and we went over that, what the average for the district was. That's all overall, 3 through 5th graders. But you can see where everyone is according to the average, but you can also see where everyone is according to the state. So the state had 54% of the students meeting or exceeding math standards. And you can see, well, he just had 55%, so above the state. Scootney Springs had 50%, meeting or exceeding, so almost near the state. Luticaga had 31%, and then Hiawatha had 37%. For 6th through 8th graders, you can see, again, I won't read all of them, but significant gaps between OSD and the state from 2015, 16, and 17, with 2017 more significant than 15 and 16. Across the board with the student groups, it is much the same with English learners, low income, SPED, and Hispanic. So we see the trend with those student groups, and then you see also the trend with our white student groups. They're above the state by 5.9 percentage points. And then when you go to 11th grade, you can see there's some gaps, not as pronounced as in 3 through 5 and 6 through 8. So in 2015, for high school, and this is Desert Oasis and Othello High School, you have the high school is actually above the state by 6 points above the state. 2016 and 17, just slightly below the state by 4 and 8 respectively in those years. And then I wanted to just share also science. So 5th grade science, again, it's the same from 2014 to 2017. Significant gaps, especially in 2017 with the 24-point difference. And then across the board, with those same student groups, you can see gaps in the deficit, with the exception of the white student group, where you see a plus 10. For 8th grade, with the exception of 2014, where there's a plus 1 difference, where we are just above the state. You can see in 8th grade that we have fallen below the state, where in 2017, we're minus 12 difference below the state. The student groups are the same, with the white student group still in the plus by 1.9. And then 10th grade biology, you can see in 2015 and 2016, or 2015 there was plus 1 above the state, and then 14, 16, and 17 we are below the state. So you can see that there are gaps, and you can see the trends also. So if you can go to the slide that just gives a summary. You can see approximately 2,500 students in OSD took the ELA in mathematics, Smarter Balance Assessment in spring. 33.3% of those students met or exceeded the standards in English Language Arts. And 32.3% of OSD students met or exceeded standards in mathematics. We also put a comment, the results revealed an achievement gap exists between student groups, especially our English learners, low income, special ed, and our Hispanic students. Also, some observations that are not listed there. The most significant gaps in English Language Arts occurred in grades 6 through 8 with the following student groups: low income, SPED, and Hispanic. So again, as you were listening to the data and you heard those trends, the most pronounced gaps were at our middle school. And again, in those student groups that I shared, low income, SPED, and Hispanic. And then also the most significant gaps in mathematics also occurred in grades 6 through 8. And again, with the same student groups, low income, SPED, and Hispanics. And then in science, the most significant gaps in science occur in grades 5 with the following student groups: low income, SPED, Hispanic, and our English learner population. So this is all data for us. It gives us our current reality. When you look at the remainder of the slides, you have the claims. Claims are different from the assessment, whereas the assessment is based on a scaled score. The claims are based on the skills that the students have to show that they know before they graduate, and also that leads them to college and career preparation. When you look at the English claims, what that's saying is there's 4 claims. There's a reading claim, there's a writing claim, there's a speaking and listening, and there's a research and inquiry claim. And before I go into just some of that data, Talia, if you can pull up the Smarter Balance. So just to share with the Board of Directors, and just scroll down just a little bit. Keep scrolling. So if you can see here, this is how it lays out. And this is a document that all of our administrators are familiar with, and our principals also, and our teachers are becoming familiar with this also, where you have the claim, which is evidence-based on what the student can do and knows. So that's a high-level phrase. So when you look at this, concepts and procedures, which we're focusing on as a district, what that's saying is, at a high level, students can explain and apply mathematical concepts. So that's high level. But then you have the target, which is how we're assessing. So the teachers are using the targets. So that gets more narrow, and the targets are derived from the standards. So when you look at the target, you can see it falls within that claim, but it's more narrow. So now we know the target for a teacher, one of the 11 targets in this particular claim, you have to represent and solve problems involving multiplication and division. So what does that really mean? Well, let's go to the standard, and you'll see how the standard breaks it down. And the OA and all the other symbols are just broken down to mean operations and algebraic tasks. They all have representation. So that's what we mean by claim and a target, and it has to be tied to the standard. So going back to the presentation, that's what I mean when we say we have 4 claims. So those are those 4 overarching ideas, but we also know those are tied to targets and tied to standards. And just an overview, what you're really looking at is you really want to look at less red, not a lot of red. So we're really wanting students to be above, but also at or near. So anything in blue with the golden rod, that's what we want. but especially in the blue. So as you can see, in claim 1, which is a reading claim, which is what we're focusing on this year, we're really looking to decrease that red portion in all of our schools. And you can look at the writing claim. Again, we're looking at decreasing the red in the writing claim. And looking at the speaking claim, the same thing, speaking and listening. Greater number of students in the blue and in the goldenrod. And then in the research claim, again, we're moving toward increasing the number of students in the blue and goldenrod and decreasing the number of students, or the percent of students that are in red. Again, the claims are based on specific skills that students should know and can do. And then similarly in mathematics, you have 4 claims: concepts and procedures, which is a district-wide focus; problem solving and modeling data analysis; and then communicating reason. So when you look at the first claim, concepts and procedures, we're looking at decreasing the percentage of students that are in that red and putting them in the blue and goldenrod. Problem solving and math, modeling and data analysis, same. For communicating reasoning, the same. Increase the amount of students in the blue and goldenrod, decrease the amount of students that are in the red. So what I would like to just share with the board of directors, there is very specific things that are happening across the district. The first I've shared with you at the beginning of last year, the focus on concepts and procedures, and also the focus on reading comprehension. Those are 2 big foci. However, you've also heard teaching and learning department, especially our Associate Superintendent, Pete Perez, talk about our focus around collective efficacy, but specifically teacher clarity is what we're looking at as a district. And we talked about the hinge point and really what we're doing with the teachers and our principals around teacher clarity. That represents 2 years worth of growth. What I will share with the board of directors is that there will be an extensive presentation on November the 9th, because that's when we do ends 2. So we'll be sharing more specifically what are we doing to address these gaps, because we realize, looking at the data, there's significant gaps, but as we have shared in my conversation with some of our members, that's our current reality. We know. Now we have to move forward and have a plan. We do have a plan. We'll be presenting that to the board during ends 2, November the 9th. Also, what will be presented on November the 9th is the booklet that we'll be sharing with the board. So if you remember at the board workshop, I presented a draft version of the district plan based on the ends. And I also share with you that we will be presenting not just a district plan based on the ends, but a director plan and a school plan. So all of that is almost in finished form. That will be presented to the board also on November the 9th. So it will be clearly articulated what the district's plan will be to address all the gaps that you just heard. Any questions on?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Probably a philosophical question, I
Yeah.
suppose. When I see these, I've seen these for years, but it always concerns me. I don't understand, besides the fact that that's how the state does it, I really don't like pulling these numbers out by race, because I just, in my mind, I've never seen any evidence that if you're a Hispanic person or a Hispanic child, that for some reason you can't learn as well as a white child. The income, I've seen a lot of information on income barriers when it comes to learning, but I've never seen anything when it comes to race, and to me it's uncomfortable for me. I don't know why we, as a district, why we need to keep doing that, even though the world seems to. And unless you know some information that I don't, but I've never seen anything that shows that a particular race regardless of income, learns, language. I understand language. I definitely understand 40%. If you don't speak the language, it's difficult to learn in a language you don't speak. But just being white or Hispanic, I just have a hard time. The numbers just don't mean anything to me when they're broken down that way. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but
I agree.
Awesome. Point taken.
Not to mention, we know that 2 or more races is probably not the correct number, and so that, are those numbers even really, depends on who fills out the form, but.
Right.
Which is why I think in the past, in our policies, we wanted to make sure that when we were looking at diversity in schools, it was really more about English language learners,
Exactly.
because that was the bigger challenge to learning than anything else.
Point taken. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? We look forward to the presentation on November the 8th at the board meeting. And that concludes superintendent's comments.
Okay, moving on to item C3, tennis court update.
Good evening.
Good evening.
good evening.
So, hey, I came in at just the right time from the last meeting. The timeline presented to you last meeting, we're right on schedule with that timeline. 2 weeks ago, the light pole bases arrived and were installed. And last week, the paving company showed up and they got the paving done. And today they've cut out all the saw cutting's been done for the fencing to go in. So they should be starting fencing tomorrow. We have a meeting scheduled on Wednesday with the contractor and Architects West to review what's being done and make sure we are still on schedule and what's left to do. So, do you have any questions, concerns?
The tennis court surfacing, does it have to be a certain temperature to do that, or?
I'm going to find that out on Wednesday. It's one of my
Okay.
questions.
That's my only concern, is that's when we're gonna fall behind, is November 7th if it's too cold. And
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you know the answer to this one either, Greg, but it seemed like it had the pavement had to cure before the surfacing was put on. Do you know the answer to that one?
I do not know the answer to that, but I can look into that also.
I think that's what they shared with us before, that it needs some cure time, and that's why it's not gonna be done yet.
Okay.
What was the reason that we decided, and I'm sure this was in the plan in the first place and I overlooked it, but the reason that we had to have the fence all the way out to the street? Does anyone remember that one?
The fencing torn out along 4th Avenue
Well,
or
no,
extended to the street?
all the way to the, okay, and maybe it was there, it'd be embarrassing if it was, but on Juniper,
Uh-huh.
that parking lot there, was that always fenced in?
It's always been there, yes.
All right, then I was embarrassed.
The fencing along 4th Avenue from the parking lot to the football field was removed. It was old and ugly, and it was easier to redo the rocks with that gone. And then so we were installing new 10-foot, 12-foot, or 14-foot fence for the tennis courts anyways, and so we would have had a 6-foot and a 14-foot fence. So we're just going to have a 14-foot fence and then new sections installed in between where it was removed at to the existing stuff, so.
All right. Any other questions? Thanks, Greg.
All right, thank you. I'll look into those and get back to you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item C4, School District Adams County Fair Report. Sure, absolutely.
So this is just going to be a really quick presentation about what we did at the fair and some of the feedback that we got from having a fair booth, which I believe is for the first time that the school district has done this at the fair. So my name is Jessica Shank. I'm the director of STEM, and my primary responsibilities are to provide instructional support for science and math, to help with integrated projects, and to lead the STEM efforts around design thinking, problem-based inquiry, and maker and thinker space activities. One of the reasons I really like my work is I feel like it fits into every piece that we're doing right now as a district as we move forward. So yes, it does include foundational skills, but STEM is involved with global pathways, skill development, and even the Birth to 5 program as well, because STEM starts early. You can back up just one slide. On the vision, I think that having the booth really fits with the goal to have an environment of respect and rapport, because we need to have that rapport not only within the walls of our buildings, but also do that with our community. And so the booth gave us that opportunity to have that communication. So this is a picture of the booth, and I'm just going to do a really quick rundown of the different things that we had there. So the next slide is a close-up of the 3D printer that I borrowed from Nick Fletcher at McFarland Middle School. So this is normally in his classroom, and it was wonderful to see all of his students come by and say, "That's our 3D printer." We were trying to come up with just something really simple that we could print and show people what is possible with a 3D printer. And so what we made were, what it's printing right now is a set of 9 smartphone microscopes. And so it took about 4 hours to print 9 of them. And when they're slipped over the camera of a smartphone, it turns the camera into a 100 power microscope. And that's the kind of thing that we've given to kids in the past, and it's just a really cool example of putting science into kids' hands. So that's salt in the middle picture and some bug parts in the far left picture. We also had a makerspace where kids were able to make art bots. And so this was using arts and crafts to create a robot, but it then include motors and batteries to make it vibrate so that when it's turned on, it moves and makes art. And this was great, just being able to see parents and adults work with their kids. They weren't easy to make, a lot of trial and error. The other thing that we had here is this green square, and this is a blue mouse with some directional buttons on it, and that's called a code and go mouse. And so that was an activity where kids were practicing computational thinking in coding the mouse to move around a maze. And these were just a few more pictures of kids at work. The younger kids just colored, and that's great too. So on the table, in addition to the hands-on activities, Amy Paris was able to share information about the CTE programs, and more specifically the Career Showcase that's happening next week at the high school. And so was able to connect with people about that event that's coming up. Jennifer Garza was able to share information about Ready for Kinder and the programs that we're doing, how to get kids reading more at home at younger levels. And we even, a few of the people that I worked with at the booth were literally pulling people out of the crowd who had little kids and saying, "Hey, you need to sign up now." And so we got a lot of sign-ups for that. We had a raffle for a few items. We had a donated 3D printer, a donated Code and Go mouse, and then some of the Ready for Kinder items. We had almost 500 entries in that raffle, so there was a lot of interest in that. Outside the commercial building, we also had a school bus, and inside at the table, we were giving information about the need for school bus drivers, which is still a need, so if anybody's listening, we need school bus drivers. And then this is, as a former newspaper reporter, I love just listening and I love observing. And so I was making a point of writing down things that I heard people say to get feedback about what they were thinking. And so some of the comments from just being surprised that, wow, this is actually happening in classrooms. I talked to one high school student who was not aware of the engineering classes available at the high school. And his comment was, "Hey, I'm going to switch classes." That was something that he was going to go look into. I loved the conversations around the 3D printer, adults and kids alike. And most of their conversations started with, "Hey, we could print." And it was just, different things that they might need for their business or things that they would do for fun. It was really getting people talking about possibilities. I talked to one woman after hearing about what Amy Paris is doing. She said, "Hey, I'm glad to hear we're involving businesses more." People who run daycare groups, Cub Scout groups, wanting information about STEM activities for their kids. And then this was a great conversation between a dad and his daughter. And so they were playing with the Code and Go mouse. And he pointed up to one of our signs and he said, "See, STEM is science and math. If you want to be a scientist when you grow up, you need to keep your math scores up." And so it was just a really kind of just sweet moment between the father and child. My favorite comment, though, is the next slide. And I heard this in so many different ways. Othello schools are really changing. And so it was just a really good way for people to see some of that change that's getting started. I want to thank by name the people who gave time to be at the booth, because it allowed me to build rapport with my colleagues, but these people really made this possible. In addition, both Pete and Sandra and John Wiseman helped with a lot of the setup and takedown, and without their help, it would not have happened. So we have plans to do this bigger and better next year, and that is all I have unless you have any questions.
Heard a lot of positive feedback, so I think it was a really good idea to do that at the fair.
Thank you very much. That was awesome. Moving on to item C5, Othello High School Annual Report.
Good evening. So we wanted to give you guys an abbreviated version of what you guys saw last Tuesday, but I think for the benefit of our community who is here and also who is watching, I wanted to share a little bit of the journey that Othello High School under our leadership has been on for the last, since January. So let's go to the first slide. We started with an exercise about trying to reacquaint and reconnect ourselves with why is it that we became educators. When I came on board in January, it became fairly apparent quickly from conversations with key stakeholders that we needed to kind of reconnect with our why. And so we did an exercise back in the spring as to why is it that we became educators, and even further, why is it that we work at Othello High School. And out of that work came this vision statement, which reads, OHS inspires and supports all students to positively impact their futures as lifelong learners. And then after that, we went about coming up with the how. So how is it that we are going to inspire and support our students? So in our various different retreats, we came up with some really specific action statements to inspire, and those are the three right there that you see in front of you. One, to know our students and build relationships. Two, to provide relevant curriculum. And three, to provide engaging instruction. And how are we going to support our students? We are going to provide them with clear expectations, learning experiences, and opportunities to develop skills. And we will develop and foster independence, resilience, and a growth mindset within our students. And last but not least, we will provide students with opportunities for help in their classes, access to available resources, and advocacy in helping students navigate obstacles as they work toward graduation. And the next piece of the exercise is to kind of get our teacher leaders within their departments looking at the next level of work. So we had them engage in an exercise to come up with department goals. And here's just one example of what the science department was able to brainstorm and come up with. So I won't read all of that, but very specific, very smart, goal-oriented. Next slide. And this is basically our way forward. This is the way we are approaching the future at Othello High School. Everything that we do emanates from the instructional vision at the district level. After that comes in the vision that we developed as a collective group. Then after that come the action statements that I just read to you. And then again, below that is the OHS department goals. Based on all of those things above, we are going to, and we have already engaged and developed a plan of action to bring professional development to our teachers, to our educators, about what it is that we need to engage in learning and practicing. And then we want to see those new strategies, those new ways of doing things reflected in their classroom practices. And then we, as a team, we are going to monitor those going through classrooms. And we go to classrooms every single day. Each and every one of us has 2 coaching days. And what does a coach do? They watch performance and they provide immediate feedback. And we're doing that together as a team 2 days a week. Each one of us goes into classrooms. So there's actually somebody in classrooms every single day of the week. And that's how we monitor and provide feedback to our teachers to kind of see that next level of work. One of the things that kind of ties into the ends, and I have given you a folder with some handouts. Basically, N2 is graduation and advancement. And when I came on board in January, I saw that the graduation rate was 78.5. And I said to the staff, I stood in front of them and I said, that is not acceptable to me. That is not, it shouldn't be acceptable to us. It shouldn't be acceptable to, it's not definitely acceptable to our community. We got to strive to reach that 100% graduation goal. So we set a goal to increase our graduation rates by 3 to 5% every single year. I'm happy to report that unofficially, that this last school year, when all was said and done at the end of summer school and all of that, we graduated 214 students out of 243, which again totals up to 88% graduation rates. And again, that's an unofficial number. We'll have to wait for OSBI to put out the official numbers. And then one of the things that we are really proud of is the Adopt a Senior campaign. And that is something that we implemented as a staff. There were something like 52 seniors in peril of not graduating for various different reasons. But I stood in front of the staff and I said, let's do this. Let's adopt a senior, somebody that you have been that you have known for the last 3-4 years, somebody that you've made connections with, somebody that you have good rapport with. And out of those 52 seniors, we were able to graduate 46 of them, which amounts up to 88% success rate in that specific, the Adopt a Senior campaign. Okay? Next slide. And now my assistant principal, Mr. Reeser, is going to go into the ELA data.
All right, so just kind of quickly, reading comprehension is a focus at the district level, and it's definitely a focus at the high school as well. A couple of the things that we really, based on some of the data that we got back from our 2017 SBA data was showing that vocabulary, central idea, and key details are really still our kind of weak spot in terms of our student skills, and so that's going to again be our focus for the year, along with some text analysis. That's something that we've been showing some improvement on and would like to continue to improve for the next couple of years. So we set a couple of goals, and they're kind of lofty in nature, which we're proud of, and I think we can definitely meet those goals. So if you look at the claim data that I have there for you, all the way to the right is the 10th grade claim from last year, and it shows that about 26% are below, so that red that Dr. Hurst was talking about, we're going to try to make that quite a bit smaller, and so we're going to want about 80% of our students to be at or near standard in reading claim 1. And then along with that, we would like to see our SBA passage rate go from last year 56%, which was up 4 points from 52% the year before. We want to see it go all the way to 65%, and I think that's something that we can definitely meet based on some of the things that we've already gotten started with.
Okay, so the handouts that you have in your folder, basically, we know and understand that our math scores are not what we want them to be. So that's going to be our area of focus for this year and beyond. And Mr. Schwartz, who is in charge of the math department, is going to talk about a program that we brought to Othello High School this year.
So this year, myself and 2 other people, our intensified algebra teacher, Hector Aranzazu, and our instructional coach, Mandy Perez, went to Pasco for 3 days to see what Agile Mind had to offer us, and they offered us a very good thing. What's going to be happening, well, what has happened already is that we have 20 students currently in this class at the high school, and they're receiving approximately 93 minutes of instruction daily. Now, that's a little bit off just because of our collaboration times, 32 minutes per class. Otherwise, Tuesday through Thursday, they're receiving 100 minutes of instruction. These students are having this instruction during first and second period. Mr. Aranzanzu has these kids for both those 2 classes. These kids were selected by their SBA scores from 8th grade. They scored either a level 1 or level 2. And also one of the requirements is that they had not taken algebra before. The emphasis of the class is to focus on problem solving and modeling. And the idea is that with this intensified math, they get their scores up so that way they can be successful in geometry and algebra 2, which are state requirements. Up above on the handout, you can see kind of the premise of the Agile Minds intensified algebra program.
And the plan is to expand the program. This is like a pilot year, and we are now in the process of finishing up with the I grant, so then we can apply to expand the program. And if we get the grant, it'll be a 4-year grant, and then we hope to engage a lot more students for the next 4 years when we get that grant. So that program, the Agile Minds, kind of ties into academic competencies, which is end 1 in the ends policies document. And another program that we have at Othello High School that ties in with ends 2 is graduation and advancement, and that is the AVID program that Mr. Reeser is going to talk about.
So AVID is really one of these programs that we're super excited about and have actually had around for a number of years. This is our 7th year having an AVID program. Currently, just a little bit of information. There's on average 143 kids that take advantage of this program. They start in 9th grade, and for many of the kids move on until they're seniors. A lot of kids in that senior year don't necessarily continue on with the program because they've kind of ascended past what the program has to offer, and they're looking to fill that elective with an additional course, a lot of times an AP or a college in the classroom course, which we'll talk a little bit about. But this program really has had a benefit on our graduation rate. If you look at the information that I provided, of the students, 96 that have made it through to their 12th grade year, 95 have graduated. This doesn't take into account the kids that move past the program there a lot of times in their junior year to take on other challenges. Kind of what AVID is all about is it stands for academic achievement via individual determination, and so really it's teaching them skills to move beyond just graduation and into college readiness and success. These students that are in AVID are kids that are, when they come in 8th grade, they're anywhere between like a 2.3 to all the way to like a 3.1 student. So they're kind of those middle of the road students that we are wanting to prepare for college success. So just a little bit about these kids. 88% of the AVID students are free and reduced lunch. There's about average 143 kids in the program on any given year. But some of the awesome things is 45% of these kids are taking either AP classes or college in the classroom courses. 89% of these kids are taking either the ACT or the SAT. Most of them are taking both. 92% of kids at the end of 4 years plan to attend and have been accepted either a 2 or 4 year college. So that's a significant number of kids moving on to college that stay through the program. And those kids, about 92% of them are on course for college, meaning they're taking all the requirements, taking the foreign languages and the higher level classes that they need to be on track for college. So a lot of really good information that AVID provides helps prepare these kids for college, and so that's really been a big successful program for Othell High School for a number of years now.
Thank you, Mr. Reeser. And AVID actually stands for Advancement via Individual Determination, so academic achievement in a sense, yes. And last but not least, Husky Futures. I think Husky Futures kind of connects to end number 3, personal responsibility and citizenship. So basically, we got together with a Husky Futures team, a committee that we put together, composed of teachers, administrators, instructional coach, and we wanted to basically revamp the program. We wanted to come up with goals, so we came up with 3 specific goals, as you see on the handout. Number 1 is students will take responsibility for setting and achieving academic goals. Number 2 is students will explore post-secondary options, plan a personal pathway to achieve life readiness. And number 3, students will have an opportunity to learn and engage in civic endeavors locally and globally. Then we came up with some student skills and knowledge base that we wanted to impart in our students, and those came out to be interpersonal skills, collaboration skills, critical thinking, resume building, time management, interview skills, and post-secondary explorations. So knowing that we meet once a week on Mondays, we wanted to kind of break down the different sessions. We have 30 minutes on Mondays, and we said we're going to have 2 academic days, so that students, and those correlate to the objectives. So academic days correlate to objective number 1, students taking responsibility for their education. So we have academic days the 1st and 3rd Mondays of the month. The students will check grades and chart GPA. They will have individual conferences with their teachers, and they will form study groups to help each other. And then we'll also include some study skills lessons to impart on those days. Then on the 2nd Monday of the month, we will engage the students in the high school and beyond plan. So basically, they're going to be taking interest surveys at the beginning of each grade level, because their interests might change from one year to the next. And then they will start to study a career and education that is needed to be successful in that career. And they will complete a 4-hour on-site experience and write a formal write-up of that experience, and complete an application that matches the above research, either going to college or university, technical school, military, etc. And then the last thing that ties into goal 3 and then and also to N3 is personal responsibility and citizenship. We have the character development program, which will happen every 4th week of the month. And this is basically by Jostens. It's a free educational video resource that teaches character development in classrooms by showcasing tangible life lessons with rich, raw, and engaging video content, followed by some reflective questions and discussions that the students will engage in as part of that program. So that, in a nutshell, is the journey that we have embarked on at Othello High School. And we'll take any questions, comments that the board members and school officials may have.
Any questions, board? If not, thank you, gentlemen. That was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item D. And just for board members' information, under item D, EL 12 and EL 13 is our superintendent's monitoring report, along with our response documents from the last board meeting. So unless there's any questions or comments, we can move on to item E. Okay, moving on to item E, policy review. And on for policy review, we have GP 11 and EL 7 are the ones that were on for this schedule, for this cycle to review. So before we get started with the others that are on this list, is there any recommended changes for item E1, GP 11, board members' conflict of interest? Okay, and if not, and under E4, EL 7, any recommended changes? Okay, so items E2, E3, E5, E6, E7, and E8 are items that we decided to keep on, and E9, sorry, based on some grammatical changes that we wanted to look at and maybe add. And so we will start with EL5, staff treatment. Was there any changes provided by the board? Okay.
There were for me.
Okay.
Just to, in my mind, make it read a little better, and the board can choose to keep it if they want. But when looking at number 1, I just felt that saying a failure to provide a working environment read better to me than a failure to have a working environment, and probably a little easier for the superintendent to comply with. The other wording for number 2, instead of a failure to have employment of, I just recommend this as a failure to employ personnel. I don't think it takes away from the meaning of the policy. The same thing for number 4, a failure to employ staff. Tilly, are you good? Can I keep going, or if I get too fast, just let me know. I know you're wanting to change it, as I was saying, right? And then number 6, a failure to provide an environment rather than have an environment. Those were just some simple wording changes that I recommend.
Those make sense to me. The rest of the board?
What is the purpose behind changing accordingly to therefore?
Where? Oh.
I believe some of the.
So it came up in a previous board meeting. It was just to make them all. Some said accordingly, some had said therefore. So I think it would just one was chosen, so they're all the same. That was all.
Sure. So does the board Do we have consensus to make those changes that Director Simmons provided?
I'd like to see them in writing in the next board meeting.
Well, I think she's doing them right now. So,
Well, I see that, but then I don't want to go to the board policies in 3 weeks and have it not be what I think it says.
I know.
Yeah, I don't have
Okay.
any issue with that. That just means put it back in there and then
okay,
if it all looks good, there'll be could even have a blanket approval of it next.
okay. So if, we'll just go ahead and make those changes to EL5 and include it. Or are they? Okay, the changes have been made if you guys want to refresh.
I don't see them. They look the same to me.
Oh, I'll make another one, Talia. It says a failure to employ personnel or use of volunteers. It should say a failure then to employ personnel or use volunteers. Should come out of that on number 2.
Yeah, they were made. Let us know when you're ready, Talia, and then we'll refresh again. Okay. So the changes have been made, if you want to look at them really quick, and then I'll entertain a motion to accept EL5 as changed.
I move to accept the revisions to EL5.
Motion's been made by Director Simmons to accept revisions to EL5. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Director Mike Garza. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 4-0. Moving on to EL6, staff compensation.
As I mentioned in a few board meetings ago, I'm working on a complete redraft of EL6. I don't mind approving this, but I just want to make sure that as a president, you know that I am intending in the next few board meetings to bring a complete redraft for the board's consideration of EL6.
Okay. Was there any changes to this EL, Director Simmons, that you had? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve revisions.
I move to approve the revisions of EL6.
Motion's been made by Director Mike Garza to approve revisions to EL6. Second?
Second.
Second by Director Simmons. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Next is EL8, budget planning.
This one was a little bit more awkward trying to figure out. If you read that as is, by taking out the recommended budget from the other one, it takes away the meaning, I think. And so I just thought that maybe the way it could be written, I might need the board's input on this one, because I don't know if I got this one down. If it said, therefore the superintendent, comma, when recommending a budget, comma, shall not cause or allow. Then the rest would fit in. Otherwise, I think you'd have to put in a budget comma on every single line if you didn't have it on the overarching statement. board think about that?
I'm okay with that.
That clears it up for me.
And then, it was also, instead of a failure to have under number 2, would be a failure to provide.
Okay.
I think that was it on that one.
Okay, we'll add EL8 to our next board meeting policy review. Moving down to EL9, budget execution.
My only recommendation on this one would be for number 1. I think it should say an expenditure of more funds than are anticipated.
So get rid of more?
No, just add an expenditure of
More.
to the beginning of it.
Oh, I see.
Because we're okay with you allowing more funds to be received.
Just not
Just
spending
not
more funds.
Just not spent.
It's not, okay. So we'll include all the rest of the changes in our next board meeting policy review. So moving on to item E7, EL12, communication and counsel to the board. Is there any changes to that one?
Just one. On number 7, if you read that, therefore the superintendent shall not cause or allow information in unnecessarily complex, lengthy form, or a lengthy form. I would say information to be presented in unnecessarily complex or lengthy form. Right.
Okay.
To me, makes more sense. I don't know what the rest of the board feels. So
Yeah,
just
that
add to
makes
be
sense.
presented after information.
Yeah. Okay. We'll include that change as well at our next policy review. Just want to remind Director Simmons, if you could just bring those notes with you to the next board meeting, just to make sure that those changes were made the way you made them. Moving on to E8, EL15, student safety, conduct, and discipline.
Number 3.
Yeah, well,
I can sense a pattern. I
the
know which one you're working on here.
yeah, the overall one, though, therefore the superintendent shall not cause, allow, or ignore. I know why ignore was put in there, because ignore was in number 3. So I think that if you took out or ignore and just said, like you have been, shall not cause or allow, and then number 3 would say the negative impact of suspension or expulsion on student success to be ignored. I think that, to me, reads better, because ignore, when you applied it to all the other 5, I was struggling with that one.
The problem with that is then now we're creating an inconsistency again too. We're trying to make it consistent, and now you have one that's
Yeah.
different.
Right. Actually,
I would agree with what you're saying.
or it could be,
Or ignore in the beginning of the sentence.
well, I think you'd have to say the ignorance, which that I don't think would be worded right. But you could start it with the failure to recognize the negative impact of suspension or expulsion on student success. Either one, I think, would work.
I like the
I
one
like
you just said.
Failure to
Yeah.
recognize.
It's a failure to recognize.
It fits with the other wording.
So then it would just be the failure to recognize at the beginning of number 3, Talia, and nothing else changed. That was it for that.
Okay, that'll be in next policy review, and then last one, EL19, mandatory policies. Any recommended changes there? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve EL 19 with revised, with its revisions.
So moved.
Motion been made by Director Ashton to accept EL 19 with its revisions.
Second.
Seconded by Director Mike Garza. Discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 4-0. Okay, moving on to item F. There will be a need for executive session for approximately 30 minutes for the purpose of discussing staff evaluation, but we'll take a 5-minute recess before then and begin at 8:46. Thank you all for coming.